Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for what some people are calling the scariest movie in years, Hereditary. And without really getting into too much, Hereditary is essentially about the Graham family, and they are suffering a pretty big loss. The matriarch of the family has died, and basically the rest of the film is after this significant death. A lot of weird things start to happen, and the family tries to cope with it in many various ways, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Hereditary in general, I was very interested in this movie. I mean, just from the trailers and the marketing, it looked really haunting, honestly, and look, a lot of times when I hear that phrase, oh, it's the scariest film ever, it doesn't really faze me much because we hear that every single year. We heard that last year with It. We heard that the year before with something like that. We heard that years before with The Conjuring. Hell, when Evil Dead came out, the remake, they said it was the single scariest movie ever, and it certainly, well, it was an entertaining film. It certainly wasn't that at all. So, going into Hereditary, I really did not know how it was going to turn out because horror films, you know, I think that we're definitely living in a really great time for them, but they don't really scare me. However, that is not at all the case. Hereditary is fucking scary. This movie is horrifying. It is basically everything that everyone has been saying and is definitely one of the scariest things I have seen in a very long time. It is also one of the best movies of the year. We're just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And going into this film, that is definitely something I was very much looking forward to. I thought the cast was really stellar, and they absolutely are. Everyone really does kill it here, but easily the standout in this movie, and the person I think we're going to be talking about for years to come, is Toni Collette as Annie, who, look, I've always really enjoyed Toni Collette. I've always thought she's a very good actress, but this might just be her best performance yet, because what she does here as Annie is truly remarkable. Annie is someone who, without getting into it, did not have the greatest relationship with her mother, and despite the fact that she doesn't really know how to come to terms with it and how she should really feel, throughout the film she starts to become more and more unhinged. There's just such a insurmountable amount of stress going through her. There's so much stuff that she has suppressed as a child, and the more the film goes on, the more, like I said, just off the walls she really does get, and she does an incredible job with this. Two scenes in particular I think should make her a candidate for Best Actress at the Oscars. I don't think they're going to nominate her, unfortunately, because the Oscars tend to overlook performances like this, but I think she absolutely does deserve it. She gives the performance of a lifetime, absolutely stole the show, really creeped me out in some scenes, and really did an incredible job here. She easily, many people have said she is the best actress of this year so far, and I would very much agree with that. She was phenomenal here. And then someone else I really do want to highlight in this movie is Alex Wolff as Annie's son, Peter, who, I'm going to be honest, I haven't really ever thought of him that much of a serious actor. I just saw him pop up in a few things. I'm like, oh, he's doing really good. But after this movie, I absolutely should be taking more seriously because he is fantastic here. I really loved this character. And again, I can't really say too much because of spoilers, but he does have a very personal connection to what's going on here. And he is very much affected in his own way. And a lot of the major events in the movie are because of him. And this has caused him and Annie to have a very sort of just very volatile relationship. It's just not very healthy at all, and I really loved getting into his character. Where they end up going with him, I definitely did not expect, and he was absolutely fantastic. I think he definitely is making a real name for himself, and I really do want to see him more stuff because he really is impressing me lately, and I think he definitely, like I said, has a real future after this film. And then the rest of the cast here also does a fantastic job. Millie Shapiro as Charlie. Holy shit, was this girl creepy. I mean, she's so quiet and so reserved, but the moments that you see her, you're just something about her, you're just creeped out by. There's something off about this character. There are so many scenes with her that I'm truly never going to forget. Something as simple as just a little noise that she makes or something she says just really set me off. And look, the only thing I've seen her in prior to this is Matilda the Musical. This blew blew that way out of the water. She is absolutely fantastic, and I really do want to see her more stuff. And Dowd, once again, I mean, she's a fantastic actress, and she does a really great job here as this very mysterious character, Joanna, who I don't really want to say too much about. And then Gabriel Byrne really is sort of like the most normal out of all of them. He really is just the father that's trying to, you know, hold on. He's trying to keep everyone together. He's doing what he can to, you know, just make sure everyone is just sane, you know, not losing their sanity, which they absolutely are. And I really did love his character. Where he ends up going, you really do feel bad for this guy, because he kind of, like I said, is the guy who's kind of in the dark about a lot of this stuff, and he doesn't want to believe what's going on. But at the same time, you can see that he really starts to, you know, at the same time, he very much is dealing with a lot of things as well. I think the entire cast here just does such a phenomenal job. Everyone had really great chemistry, and it's easily one of the best casts I have seen in any film so far this year. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because this is really where we get into what made this film, I think, as, like I said, terrifying as it is. We first have to talk about, like I said, Ari Aster. This is a directorial debut, and similar to Thoroughbreds, I am astounded that this is their directorial debut, because this is the kind of work that a seasoned director would usually take on, and the fact that Ari Aster did this as his directorial debut, I just think is extraordinary. This is incredible directing, because the entire film, like I said, sure, it does have a tone of a usual horror film, but it's a little bit different from most. This one, just the moment it starts off, you are very much creeped out. You are very much in that moment. Every moment it seems like something crazy is about to happen, and I really just love the way it's directed. It's so creepy, it's so mysterious, and I think that's what makes it so scary, because we are so in the dark. We don't actually know what's going on. We don't really know, where it's going to go, and I think the directing is very well done in that way. But what I also loved about this directing is that it's also very subtle. He's not very in your face when it comes to this stuff. A lot of the mysteries, they're not really spelled out for you, and I think he did a very good job with that. We'll get to that with the writing and things like that, but at its core, this film is a family drama. Sure, it does have a lot of horror elements in there, but it is very much a drama about a broken family and how this really does take them over the edge and basically destroys them forever. And I think that the directing was very well done in that way. I think he does an incredible job with it, and it's some of the best directing I've seen for any horror film, I think, ever, honestly. This is what most horror directors should aim to do, is to take a lesson from someone like Ari Aster. And again, I just can't believe this guy isn't a seasoned director, because he knows what he's doing. He absolutely has a future with horror movies, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do next, because he did just such a great job with the directing. The writing also is so great to this film, because like I said, the best thing about this movie is how mysterious it really is. I mean, from the opening moments, you know something's off about this family. They're not reacting to this death like most people should. Some of them are affected and some of them aren't, and they just don't really seem like a normal family, and you don't really know why. And as the film goes on, you start to realize more and more about these characters. A lot more reveals come out, and there's a lot of really crazy stuff in this movie. I really just loved getting into the characters here, particularly Annie. Like I said, is a very complex character. She's someone who, she's dealing with this death in ways that you might not expect her to, and she does a lot of things that seem a bit inhumane, but at the same time, you can kind of see what she's going through. Same with Peter, same with Charlie. You know, these characters, there's just something off about them. They're not reacting in the ways that you normally would in this situation, and I think that was handled very well. And like I said, the mystery of what's going on, it's not really spelled out for you. There isn't a scene where there's like a whole exposition of everything that's happening. Sure, there are scenes where characters are confessing things and we do find things out, but there's a lot of things in this movie that still remain kind of oblique, and I think it works in that way. It's supposed to be very mysterious. And I think that's what's so scary about it, and that's one of the things I really do love about the writing. But what really does make this film so scary, like I said, is the way in which it does approach the scares, because it's not like most horror films where we'll have a random jump scare and then it goes away. It's not something where there's this creature that's coming after the family. You know, I'm not going to spoil what's actually happening in this movie because, again, this is a film I think you should go into knowing virtually nothing, and I think it'll make it that much more terrifying, because I went into it knowing basically nothing. I had no idea what happened in this film, and I was very happy about that. I think that's really why it was so scary. But the way the scares are done, you know, sure, there are jump scares in this movie, and they're there, but they linger on. They don't cut away from it, and there's always this constant sense of just tension and fear, and just, as, you know, you always just fear so, you're always so worried throughout this movie, and I think they really did an incredible job with that, I have to say. When it really does come down to it, though, the main story in this movie, it might be hard for some to say, and again, without spoiling anything, I think the main story of this movie is really about the demons that we hide within us, the demons that we are afraid to really just come, you know, face and come to terms with, and we try to suppress it, similar to how Annie has suppressed a lot of things in this movie. We don't really want to admit it. We don't really want to admit how we really feel about this person, but that's really what this film is. It's confessing all of your deepest desires and all of your deepest fears, and basically you having to face them head on, and I think that really is what's so scary about this movie, is that there is something deeply relatable about it. Despite the fact that some of the stuff in this movie, yeah, it definitely couldn't happen, the way in which what the movie is trying to say very much could happen, and I think the film very well works in that way, and I think that's something that not a lot of people are going to pick up on. They are going to judge this film at face value, and it's unfortunate because I think it's much more intelligent than that, and I think that's one of the reasons why this film is so great, because it has these very relatable sort of metaphors that a lot of people can relate to, and that's something I really did love about it. The cinematography in this movie, holy shit, this is easily the best cinematography I have seen all year. I mean, just the first scene in general, it's panning over all these different models that Annie likes to make, because Annie's a character who she makes a lot of like miniatures of like things that she's seen and things in her house, and the second it starts, you feel like you're trapped there. You feel like you're trapped inside this house. You feel like this, you know, this house is part of those miniatures that Annie did make, and I really did love the way that was done. There's a lot of scenes where, like I said, you very much do feel trapped inside this house. I mean, there are scenes where we do leave the house and we'll go off to see like Peter at school or something, but this house, it just, the way it's constructed is fantastic, and there's so many great shots and things like that. And again, just simple things like knowing when to show an event. It doesn't do it in the way most horror films do. In fact, there's a pretty big thing that happens in the first like 30 minutes of this movie, which is why I haven't said a lot, because there is a big twist in the first 30 minutes of this movie that I really was not expecting, and they don't show it to you at first. You don't really know what's happening. You have an idea of what might happen, but they don't really confirm it until a little bit later. And by doing this, it gives you that anxiety. It gives you that worry of like, what's actually going on here? What are you about to show me? And I feel like most horror films, again, really should take a lesson from that. Really should, you know, look at what Ari Aster was able to accomplish. I don't know who the director of cinematography is, but he definitely knows what he's doing, and he or she knows what they're doing, and I definitely do want to see more from them, because the cinematography here, whew, there are some images in this movie that honestly are embedded in my mind forever, and I don't really think I'm going to be able to look at them in the same way as I did in this movie, because they are absolutely terrifying, and they did a really great job when it comes to cinematography, really unlike any other horror film I've seen. The score also, it's so mysterious, and it's so haunting, and they don't use it a lot, actually. It's very minimal, and that's something I really did like. They only use the score when they really need to, and they're not really reliant on it. That was one of my problems with A Quiet Place. As much as I did enjoy that movie, I did feel was a bit reliant on the score, and this film really isn't. It's much more focused on imagery and atmosphere and emotion, and I just really love that about this movie. The editing as well is fantastic. The movie is very slow-paced, and it really really does take a while to really get engrossed in what's going on. But I was in it from scene one pretty much, because the way they set it up, again, they give you that feel where it's like just something's not right here. You always feel like you're stuck watching this family, and they do such an incredible job with that. I just really loved the editing. Like I said, it was very well paced, and the third act is really when things get crazy, and it made up for the slow pace that much more, because the fact that we really did feel we took a journey with these characters in ways we just don't in other horror films. But now, guys, I do want to get into spoilers because, like I said, it's very hard to review this movie without talking about them. So let's just jump in, because I have to talk spoilers. I really do. Of course, I need to talk about the first 30 or so minutes of this movie. As we know, very early on in the film, and I definitely was not expecting this, Peter, he takes Charlie to this party, even though we knew it wasn't probably... The second that he took Charlie to that party, I knew something bad was going to go down there, and basically they're in the car, she eats this chocolate, she starts having this really bad sort of like asthma attack, and he unfortunately can't use the EpiPen on her, so he's driving her to the hospital. She sticks her head outside the window, and Charlie is decapitated in the first 30 minutes of this movie. And like I said, the way that they go about this is just so scary. A normal horror film would approach this as immediately we would see her get hit by the sign, and we'd know she's dead. Hereditary, of course, didn't do that. What they did is they linger on that shot of Peter. The camera never leaves Peter. It always shows Peter's perspective until he is forced to come to terms the next morning when he hears Annie scream, and we realize not only was, like I said, she killed by that sign, but she was decapitated, and her head is now covered with, like, all these bugs and things like that, and just that in general was a horrifying sight, and my audience gasped when this happened, and I just really want to see more horror films do that. It's just the perfect idea of, like I said, when to show something, and they did that perfectly here. But of course, the big thing in this movie is what is it really about? Because of course, as the film goes on, we start to realize that Annie's mom was obsessed with this, basically she was a sadist, she was in this cult, and they were obsessed with this demon, Paimon. Paimon is of course the king of hell, pretty much, and basically they are grooming Peter to become like Paimon. And of course, we hear very early on in the film, there's a lot of subtle clues about how, oh, they wanted Charlie to be a boy, and they, the grandmother wanted to spend more time with Charlie and not with Peter, and we see that Annie deeply resents Peter and things like that. Even though she won't admit it, she does very much resent him in that way, and once you get to the end of the film, where you realize that the whole reason that they were targeting Peter is so they can have him leave his body and go into Charlie, and Charlie can finally be that boy that they always wanted Charlie to be, and basically they were grooming, him as Paimon. That's when it really does make sense, because obviously she didn't want a boy because she knew what was going to happen. She knew what her mom really wanted, and we can see why she tried so hard to abort Peter and try to set him on fire and things like that, and it really does make a lot of sense. And again, the movie is not about demons in that sense, but again, it's about those inner demons within us and how they can really make us go off the rails, and how some of them, once you confess them, there's no turning back. And that's very similar to this movie. Once Annie confesses to Peter how she really feels about him, there really is no turning back. Even though she is sleepwalking, there really is no turning back from that. It has caused this strain in their relationship, similar to that of, like I said, Annie and her husband. Once she tells him what's really going on, he starts to think she's crazy. And I think the reason why he's lit on fire is because she tried to get him to stop it. The fact that, they didn't want him to stop it, obviously, that's why he was lit on fire and not Annie, because Annie was the one who was meant to lure Peter to this treehouse and groom him as Paimon, and I think it's very well handled that way. But like I said, I think it really is about those inner demons without us, how we really deal deal with things, how we really come to terms with death and grief and things like that. And I think it's very relatable in that sense. It's things that horror films don't really dive as deep into, don't really give us as much of a handle on. And of course, there is the character of Joan. What's her real purpose in this movie besides the fact of pieman and things like that? Well, for her, I think once again, she wants to believe that her son is there. You know, she wants to believe that her son is very much alive, and I think, again, that's something that she really wants to suppress. She doesn't want to admit that her son is dead in that way, and I think they handled that very well. The fact that she was friends with Annie's mom was just a horrifying sight, and I think they did that perfectly. And like I said, there are some images in this movie that are going to haunt me forever. Just little noises like that fucking clicking noise we hear throughout the film. Every time I hear them, I'm just like, ugh, like, it really sets me off, honestly. It's very traumatizing. It's something that I'm really not going to forget. Very similar to how most of the characters were traumatized. Not as deeply affected, but still very much did set me off, and I think they handled that perfectly. Just the little scenes of just the bugs and things like that, those are things I'm truly never going to forget, and I think just little things like that just really goes to show how they crafted a horror masterpiece here. So like I said, guys, Hereditary is pretty much everything that I want it to be and more. It is incredibly scary. It's very engrossing. It's unlike most horror films that come out today. The only film I can think about that's similar to this is like The Babadook, and even that is different from, you know, even The Babadook is different from Hereditary. It has a very different sort of tone to it. Hereditary feels a lot more evil in its execution and things like that, and I think it's very well handled. It's a film that for some definitely are not going to be able to watch. Some might not even like, because it's much different from other horror films. And I will say this, are there horror films in the past that have scared me? Yes. A Quiet Place, when I saw it, that movie, yeah, it did definitely have me very, it had me on edge a lot. It definitely did have me, you know, into the film. I was locked in for the most part, but that's a film that I'll watch it. It's very scary in the moment. It's very well done in its execution, but it will leave my head and I will move on with my life. Same with The Conjuring, same with The Babadook. See, same with even The Babadook, honestly. Hereditary, that's not the case. This is a film that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. This is a film that is really going to be in my mind. There are just things I'm thinking about right this second with this film, and it really is, like I said, making me feel a bit uneasy. Just looking at a certain image in this film, looking at a certain character, where they end up going, I think is just... The way Ari Aster was able to go about this is just unlike other horror directors. I really have not seen a horror film quite like this in a while, and it really is cemented itself as this version's Exorcist. I very much would say that. Now look, I know for some people that Exorcist isn't scary, but the knee-jerk reaction that people had to that film back then, I think is very much going to echo how people do feel about Hereditary. Is it a film that for some people might not like? Yes, it's a very slow burn. It is much more slower pace and much more focuses on the characters than it does on the scares. But that's really what makes it that much more scary. It's deeply relatable in that way. It has some of the best performances of the entire year. Ultimately, Hereditary is just everything I want in a horror film. It is easily the best of the decade, I think, in terms of horror. It deeply affected me in a way that most horror films don't. It has a fantastic performance from Toni Collette and the entire cast, but especially Toni Collette. Hopefully she does get nominated for that Oscar. I don't know if she's going to, but I really do hope that happens. It is a film that I absolutely do recommend you see. Even if you aren't as a fan of horror, I do still think it's a film to go out and see. It is incredibly terrifying, and I very much would enjoy it. I don't know if I recommend it in theaters because my audience was like laughing at it the whole time, and just judging by that, I think it's a movie to very much wait on, but it is a film that is definitely worth your time for sure. This is easily one of the best movies of the year, without a doubt, and I am definitely going to give Hereditary overall an A+. like I said, guys, there are plenty of horror films that I've watched and I've definitely been a bit creeped out on, but Hereditary was a different beast entirely. This film kind of fucked me up a bit, and definitely, like I said, it's going to be something I'm going to be thinking about for months to come for sure, and as much as it did scare me, I really can't wait to see it again, because I really do think it is a film that is very important, and like I said, different from most horror films we do get today, but also, A24, I mean, I can't say enough praise about them. Seriously, between this and First Reformed, they're killing it, and they're the best. I'm sorry, but they really are the best distributor working today. They're very selective with their stuff, and it's just really impressive how A24 has gone from this really small indie studio to, I think, one of the most innovative and original distributors working today, and it just makes me endlessly excited to see what they're really going to take on next, because they're just absolutely killing it now, and almost every single film of theirs I end up adoring, and I'm very excited to see where they go after this. Either way, guys, in my review of Hereditary, let me know what you guys' thoughts, and overall, if you have seen, love to hear your thoughts on it. Please see this movie if you haven't already. It is definitely worth your time. It is everything I think a modern horror film should really aim to be. But that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.